In April 2021, Conor McGregor sold his whiskey company in a deal valued at up to $600 million. He built it in under 3 years. It made him richer than fighting ever had. He never had to step into a cage again. So why, at 37 years old, 5 years removed from his last fight, is he walking back into one on July 11th against Max Holloway? The answer everyone gives you is ego. The retired champion who can't let go. The aging star chasing one last moment of glory. The man who needs the crowd to feel alive. That answer is clean, it is emotionally satisfying, and it is almost entirely wrong. The real answer is in his bank account, and it requires understanding a financial story that has been hiding in plain sight inside a set of company filings that almost nobody bothers to read. To understand where McGregor is right now, you have to understand where he started. In 2013, when he made his UFC debut, his paycheck was $8,000 to show up and $8,000 more for winning. A $60,000 knockout bonus brought his total first night in the big leagues to $76,000. That number sounds significant until you understand what he was building toward and how fast he built it. He talked louder than anyone. He sold fights in a way the sport had not seen before. He did not just win, he made money for everyone in the building, for the venue, for the UFC, for the pay-per-view providers, for the sponsors. The UFC noticed immediately, because the UFC is fundamentally a media company and McGregor was the most valuable media property it had ever developed. By December 2015, he knocked out featherweight champion Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, still one of the most watched moments in combat sports history. A year later, he beat Eddie Alvarez and became the first fighter to hold 2 UFC belts in 2 weight classes simultaneously. And here is the detail that explains everything that comes after. McGregor was never really selling fighting. The fights were the most expensive ad campaign in the history of sports, and the product they were advertising was Conor McGregor himself. The man who understands that his real product is his own name, that man is always eventually going to want to sell something with a higher margin than getting punched in the face. He just needs to build the name big enough first. In 2017, he did something no fighter had ever done. He stepped out of the cage entirely and into a boxing ring against Floyd Mayweather, one of the greatest defensive boxers in history. He lost the fight. He did not lose the night. His guaranteed purse was $30 million. His total take, once the pay-per-view money settled, was reported to Forbes at around $100 million. $100 million to lose a boxing match. That is not a fighter anymore. That is a business that happens to punch people. And a business that understands itself that clearly is a business that is going to start looking for ways to remove the punching from the equation. The court documents released in an antitrust lawsuit against the UFC later revealed that between 2015 and 2016 alone, McGregor earned $25 million just from his UFC bouts. Between 2018 and June 2019, Forbes calculated he pulled in $47 million from salary, purses, and endorsements combined. His fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov in 2018 brought a single-night payout reported at over $28 million. Total career fighting earnings, including the Mayweather money, have been estimated as high as $235 million. He had converted his fighting ability into generational wealth before he turned 30. And then, in September 2018, he launched Proper No. 12 Irish Whiskey. Industry veterans laughed. A loudmouth fighter taking on brands like Jameson that had existed for 2 centuries was not, by conventional analysis, a serious competitive threat. They stopped laughing fast. In its first 2.5 years, Proper No. 12 shipped more than 500,000 cases, over 6 million bottles, becoming one of the biggest Irish whiskey brands on earth. And in April 2021, McGregor sold his stake in a deal valued at up to $600 million. The fighter had successfully built a real company, and a real company can be sold. He had done exactly what every athlete is supposed to do, converted a finite physical career into a permanent financial asset. The plan worked perfectly. And this is where the story stops matching the narrative everyone has been told. The $600 million headline was never the full picture. The $600 million was the total deal value, split between 3 founders, McGregor, his manager Audie Adder, and their partner Ken Austin, and it included around $250 million that the buyer, Proximo Spirits, had already paid out during the brand's first 2 years of operation. It was not $600 million in fresh cash landing in McGregor's personal account. When his former sparring partner sued him claiming a share of the brand, an Irish court ordered McGregor to disclose what he was actually paid. The reported figure for his personal take was around $130 million. $130 million is a staggering sum by any normal measure. It is enough to never work again. It is enough to fund multiple generations of a family in comfort. But $130 million is not $600 million, and the gap between those two numbers matters enormously for understanding what happened next. Because that whiskey sale was a one-time event. He sold the asset. You only get to sell it once. The cash-out that made him a legend also ended the thing that was making him money every month. After April 2021, the most profitable venture of Conor McGregor's life was no longer his. He had traded his best recurring income stream for a lump sum. And then he broke his leg on live television in July 2021 and stopped fighting entirely. In the same month that his best passive income source disappeared, his active income source also disappeared. Both gone simultaneously. What he built with the lump sum is the story that nobody wants to talk about, and it is the most important part of this entire analysis. McGregor went into business for himself, not as the face of someone else's brand but as the owner. He bought the Black Forge Inn, a Dublin pub, reportedly spending around €2.5 million to acquire and renovate it. He launched Forged Irish Stout. He was going to do it all over again on his own terms, the same way he had done it with the whiskey. The same playbook, the same confidence, the same McGregor name on the label. Except the filings tell a different story. The Black Forge pub accumulated losses of around €2 million by 2022. Another pub under his umbrella was eventually listed as permanently closed. According to accounts filed in late 2025, the two companies behind Forged Irish Stout lost a combined €7.7 million in 2024 alone. Their accumulated losses by the end of that year had reached nearly €16 million. €16 million poured into businesses that were supposed to recreate the proper no. 12 magic without ever successfully finding it. Step back and look at the full financial picture that creates. He cashed out his best asset for approximately $130 million personal dollars in 2021. He has been pouring money into ventures that collectively lose tens of millions. The civil verdict from the Dublin jury in the Nikita Hand case, which he lost on the balance of probabilities, produced a damages award of just under €250,000 and legal cost orders reportedly around €1.3 million. His appeal was dismissed in its entirety in July 2025. These are not numbers that bankrupt a man with his assets, but they are not numbers that go in the right direction either. His estimated net worth is still around $250 million. He is not broke by any normal definition of the word. But not broke and the money is actively working for you are two completely different things. And only one of Conor McGregor's businesses ever reliably and consistently printed money. It was not the pub. It was not the stout. It was not the various ventures that followed the whiskey sale. It was him, in a cage, on pay-per-view, performing for the largest audience combat sports had ever assembled. And here is the trap that explains everything. This is not a trap unique to McGregor. It is a trap that athlete entrepreneurs walk into repeatedly, and it is cruel in a structural way that only becomes visible after the fact. The dream is to escape the thing that hurt you. Fighters want to stop fighting. The body is a depreciating asset, and every intelligent athlete tries to convert it into something that earns while they sleep. McGregor did exactly that. He converted his fists into a whiskey brand, scaled it to global recognition, and sold it for a fortune. By every metric available, he won. He executed the play perfectly. But here is the structural cruelty underneath it. The fame that made the whiskey sellable came from the fighting. He was not just the founder of Proper No. 12. He was the marketing budget, the distribution engine, the celebrity endorsement, the reason anyone in a bar in Des Moines or Singapore had heard of the brand. And when he stopped fighting, he stopped generating the attention that his businesses needed to survive. The pub, the stout, the new ventures, they were all riding on relevance that only the cage produces. Take away the fights and you do not just lose the fight purses. You lose the engine that powers everything else with his name on it. The asset that made him cannot be replaced by the assets he bought with it. Conor McGregor does not fight because he has gone broke. He fights because nothing he has built since the whiskey works without him actively being in the public consciousness, and nothing keeps him in the public consciousness the way a fight card does. The cage is not his past. It is what keeps the lights on for the entire infrastructure built around his name. So on July 11, 2026, at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, McGregor walks back in against Max Holloway, a rematch of a fight from 2013, when both men were young and hungry and still fighting at featherweight, a weight class neither can make today. McGregor is 37. He has won one of his last 4 fights. He is returning after 5 years away from competition, carrying the documented physical transformation that the New York Times investigation traced back to banned substances taken during his rehabilitation, at a weight class of 170 pounds where Holloway is also walking around heavier than his natural competitive weight. Nobody has disclosed the actual purse for this fight. But the commercial logic does not require disclosure to be legible. McGregor fighting Holloway at International Fight Week, with the UFC on Paramount and every global media outlet tracking the return, generates a pay-per-view number and a gate number and a media value that no pub in Dublin and no stout brand in Ireland can come close to replicating. The fighter who spent a decade building an empire around his name discovered the oldest rule in the business. The empire depends on the king being visible, and the king is only visible when he is fighting. He did not escape his career. He converted it into a set of businesses that require him to keep having a career. The retirement was always temporary, not because the ego demanded it, but because the economics demanded it. The richest version of Conor McGregor is also the most trapped. A man who may be worth $250 million who still has to bleed for a paycheck, because the one asset he could never sell, never franchise, never license to someone else, and never fully replace was himself. He spent a decade trying to turn the fighter into a businessman. It turns out the businessman was only ever worth as much as the fighter kept fighting. The next time you watch an athlete cash out and build an empire, ask the question this story actually raises. Did they escape the thing that made them? Or did they just find a more expensive way to stay trapped? Because some assets you can sell. Some assets you just are.